What's up guys, my name is Liam. Today we're going to be taking a look at the brand new Razer Viper V3 Pro. This has a lot of hype around its release and I've been getting asked a lot of questions about it. So how does it stack up against the competition? Does it live up to the hype? And more importantly, is this going to be the perfect gaming mouse for you? Let's check it out. Included inside the box, it does come with documentation, a set of stickers. It does come with these grips. These grips do feel similar to the same type of grips that came on the Viper V2 Pro, if you had a chance to pick that up. It also does come included with a USB-C cable. Here is the 8K receiver that is included with it. If you were to pick up the white copy, it does come with a white receiver. You do have two different options when picking this up. You can pick it up either in this white colorway or in the black colorway. I have seen some kind of mixed opinions about the coatings between both of these, and just with my experience with getting the exact same mouse in different colorways when they do have a coating on them, there is usually some variance there, and not every time you get a mouse is the coating going to feel the exact same. Sometimes I've even gotten mice in the exact same colorway where the coating on one will feel grippier than the other one, but my experience between both of these is with the white copy. This one does feel a little bit smoother to me. I do have drier set hands, so with my drier hands it does feel a little bit more slippery. The more that I do start to use this, or if it is hotter, I do live in a pretty high humid environment, if my hands do start to become clammy, or if I grab a drink of water from a cup that has some sweat on it and get my hands a little wet, then this does get quite a bit grippy. But the overall feeling of this, it does feel a bit more plasticky to me. And typically when I get these different colored mice, I usually always prefer the white colorway when it comes to the overall feeling of the coating, but it's actually going to be the opposite in this case. With my black copy, I don't know what it is, it does feel much more rubberized and much more grippy. So even if I try and drag my fingers across the surface, it's just, as you can see there, just a super rubbery feeling, where this one does have a just smoother and kind of a little bit more slippery feeling. So I'm not sure if I were to get multiple copies if I'd have the exact same experience, but between both of the copies that I currently have, I'm going to say I'm going to have to go with the black copy with the overall feeling of this more rubberized grippy feeling coating for me. But the build on these feel nearly identical to one another, starting out over on the bottom. Real simple stuff as before. You do have the power on off button over here. These skates that come on here, I do like the skate design. Obviously these skates are really large. It is kind of a little bit overkill. These skates are okay. I did find myself using these. I actually do want to upgrade these skates. They do have a pretty decent glide, but I do find on some pads when I was going back and forth that these skates do have a little bit more of tugging feeling going on some of the control pads that I've been using recently. So though I don't feel like these skates are that terrible, I do feel like there are better options out there. But the general build quality and shell integrity actually on both of my units so far, even though I've only been using these for a few days, has held up and felt very solid. The switches being used inside is the Razer optical switches, and it does feel like they have slightly been tuned a little bit. I was going back and forth and comparing them to something like the Razer Viper V2. They still do kind of have that same hollow type of feeling, but the opticals that do come on, like the Razer Viper V2 for example, they do feel quite a bit more hollow and almost a little bit more flat, a little bit more mushy. I do feel like these switches feel just a little bit more sharp and a little bit more tactile. So I do really like the changes they did make on these. I still do prefer the feeling of mechanical switches over them. And they actually have done an excellent job with the click implementation. As you can see here, there's not any side-to-side play, just a little bit of teetering there. Nothing bad or that you notice in game. And the click implementation on this really does feel great. It doesn't matter where you click the switch from front to back, all around, really solid stuff. If you were to come up here in the very front, just a very minimal sleight of play, but still even up here on the very front, a very solid implementation. So the clicks on this were done very well. The scroll feels nearly identical, if not the exact same thing, to the Viper V2 Pro. So it has a little bit of a smaller profile there, but nice light defined steps, and the center scroll click is really easy to spam. The side buttons on here, they also do feel really good as well. I do like the design. I like how they have them spaced out compared to the Viper V2 Pro, where they did not have any spacing on them and they were a bit wider there. So I do appreciate that change. On the implementation in the rear side on both my copies, you do get just a little bit of play. It's nothing that's too bad. There is some movement. Even if you were to come over here in the middle, just a little bit of play. But the clicks, they do feel really solid. The front on both of mine, they do feel similar, but they do feel just a little bit tighter. You do hit a nice defined wall there when it comes to the post travel, and I'm not getting any major type of teetering back and forth. So the implementation on these, I would say, is really good. And the way that I was gripping the mouse personally, I kind of come up more towards the front, grip it something like this, and I don't really actuate the side buttons from the rear anyways. And like I'd mentioned, everything is pretty much nearly identical over here on the feeling on my white copy. So far out of the box, everything on both of them is feeling really great. I am really impressed. So let's go ahead and drop a sound click quality. I will go ahead and I'll throw up the sound of the white and the black, and then I'll throw it up against the Razer Viper V2 as well. When it comes to the weight and balance on both my copies, honestly, the balance has felt just absolutely flawless front to back and left to right on both the white and black. So on my scale, dropping the white one on here first, 55.0 grams, then the black one, 53.8. So about a difference of 1.2 grams. This is using the Razer Snap software. So if you've used Razer Mice before, something that you're very familiar with. There are some new updates, however. There's this option here where you can sync the DPI to whatever mouse you're currently using previously. Though I do think this is a cool feature. I don't really see it being necessary for me, myself personally. Every time you're swapping a mouse, there's also going to be other types of variances you need to take into account for, such as the shape, weight, balance, but it is a cool feature to use. Another thing to keep in mind here is they do have this option that allows you to save battery life, where you can set whatever polling rate that you want when you're using this as you're working or browsing on your desktop. So you can set the desktop polling rate to 1000 Hertz, and then it will automatically switch to, say, an 8000 Hertz polling rate when you are using this mouse in game. As I was testing this out and taking a look at the internals, I really am impressed with how well of a job Razer did with engineering this. It's a very straightforward and simple design. Just taking a look at the overall PCB, nice and trimmed down, simple and straightforward. I was taking a look at the battery in here to see if anybody was looking to mod this or anything like that, and I did not weigh this battery by itself, but it is incredibly small. It is a little bit over 300 milliamp hours, and with the 8K polling rate, it probably would be best just to use this battery in there. And here's a look of the battery life usage that you're going to be getting out of each polling rate. Typically with these 8K mice, I usually charge them every night anyways, but just the overall design of this, I am really impressed by the engineering that was done here. If you take a look at the top shell, everything actually is included inside of this top shell, and it just connects to the bottom PCB via a ribbon cable right here. So really cool stuff. They have this cage up here at the top. So I do feel like this cage design is really consistent with the overall tensioning on the clicks and the side buttons, especially since my white and black copy, they do feel really similar to one another. This does claim to be using a new sensor in it. The sensor feeling on this truly does feel fantastic. I tried using this on different types of surfaces, even on glass pads. No issues at all. I had great tracking the entire time. And when it comes to the performance, Razer is always at the top of the charts. It does look like there could have possibly been some reworking here, as I'd done 8K testing before in the past. I was getting a little bit lower numbers. The 8K performance is a little bit quicker and more fine-tuned here, so I'm not sure if this is just a firmware update or if it could be a one-off, but the numbers on this looked really solid and consistent, especially coming out of the 8K. Okay, so now let's talk about the shape. And when it comes to the shape of this, I really do enjoy it a lot. I never got a chance to check out the Razer Viper V3 Hyperspeed, so this was my first experience with actually using this mouse, and I must say that I actually really enjoy this shape way more than I thought I was going to. I've heard a lot of people talk about how this mouse is really big, and to me it doesn't really feel like it's that big. The only thing about it that kind of makes it feel big to me is the hump. I do feel like it does kind of slant down towards your rear and taper off a bit more aggressively, so it does kind of make this hump feel a bit more aggressive. But even for my smaller type hand size, as I was gripping this, I like to grip it something kind of like this. It seemed to work out really great for my claw style grip, so I have been really enjoying it. I thought it was gonna be a lot wider than it is. It actually does feel a bit more narrow than I was imagining. So I feel like Razer has done a fantastic shape. One thing that I haven't seen too many people really say about this is, to me, all this is a Razer Viper Mini that is bigger. So yeah, it is quite a bit different from the original Razer shape, but the Razer Viper Mini was never truly a Viper Mini. It was kind of its own unique shape, having this more aggressive set hump style. And I'll jump more a little bit in that here in a second, but just looking at these next to each other, as you can see, though they're not exactly the same, and we will get into that, they are really similar. And I really do feel like that this brand new Razer really took inspiration from the Mini. So let's go ahead and jump into some comparisons and we'll see what it stacks up against. So first off, putting it up against the Razer Viper V2 Pro, and every time that I've loved using the Razer Viper V2 Pro when the Razer Viper Ultimate came out, I made that mouse forever, for probably 1.5 to 2 years. It was the best mouse when it came out at the time. I really enjoyed it a lot. So very familiar with the shape. I really like it a lot. The Razer Viper V2 Pro all around does feel bigger to me. It feels wider. It has more aggressive curves on the sides. So that's one thing I was surprised to see about the Razer Viper V3 Pro. It does feel more narrow on the sides. Even when you stack them together, the Viper V2 Pro is just a little bit more wide. They're in the center. And then since it flares out more aggressively towards the front and the rear, it does feel quite a bit different in the width over here in the rear as well. But the one major difference between these two is with the Viper V2 Pro, you get a much flatter filling profile at the top. And again, we do have that much more aggressive kind of mid to rearish hump here over here on the Razer Viper V3 Pro. I did want to throw this up against the Razer DeathAdder V3 Pro here really quick, because when I first saw this in a picture, I kind of thought to myself that perhaps this looked like it was just going to be an ambi style of a DeathAdder V3 Pro. And I don't necessarily feel like that's really the case at all. I do feel like these feel completely different from one another. Starting on the bottom, the DeathAdder V3 Pro feels just much larger all around. Even putting them together, it feels much wider here on the side width. Looking at the profile, the DeathAdder V3 Pro has much more aggressive curves down to the sides, and even the height profile over here on the Dave 3 Pro sticks up much higher. So these do actually feel completely different to one another in the hands, in my experience. All right, so next up, comparing it to the Razer Viper Mini Signature Edition. Like I said, I do feel like this is a scaled up Razer Viper Mini. So the Razer Viper Mini does have much more aggressive curves. They're flatter down here on the Dave 3 Pro, and it is wider in the grip width. Coming over on the rear, as you can see, the Razer Viper Mini all around is smaller, has a more aggressive curve from the top mid down to the sides, and the side profile on these, to me, they look very similar, though I do feel like the Razer Viper Mini does kind of curve down more aggressively to the front. They did have a little bit more height up here, and it flattens out a little bit more on the Razer Viper V3 Pro. Next up, when comparing it to the Logitech G Pro Superlight 2, I've been seeing a lot of people arguing on these mice back and forth online, which one's bigger. I've seen a lot of people saying both ways. To me, they actually are incredibly similar when it comes to the overall scale. The G Pro does have a little bit flatter sides. When I do stack them together, they're almost identical with the grip width. I do feel like the G Pro Superlight is just a slight bit wider there. And then when you look at these on the back profile, one of the reasons I do feel like that the people could be saying that the Razer Viper V3 Pro does feel bigger is you can see it kind of has a slower taper from the top mid out to the sides. So that can slightly make it feel a bit wider at the top of the mouse, depending on your grip style, where the Superlight Pro does curve down to the side. So it does feel a little bit more narrow up here at the top. And then when it comes to the side profile, these don't have that much of a difference when it comes to the height. Now, the hump on the Razer Viper V3 Pro, it does feel more aggressive due to the fact that it curves off to the rear more aggressively. So it does kind of make that hump feel like it's a little bit more pointy. And then the G Pro Superlight, it does taper off far less aggressively down towards the rear. So it does kind of fill up your hands back here a lot more. And with my grip style, it does feel like it is a bit longer in the hands due to that fact, even though the actual length of them is not that far apart from one another. So even though these are incredibly similar in size, you can see they do have these different properties. So depending on how you do grip the mouse, it can actually change how the overall scale and the difference between both of these actually does feel for you. All right, next up, putting up against one of my goats, the WLmouse Beast X 8K. When I stack these together, the grip width on these is incredibly close to one another. I do kind of feel like there's a possibility that the Viper V3 Pro might be just a hair wider, but it is not that much of an obvious difference. I do feel like there is just a slight bit more of curves on the bottom of the Viper V3 Pro going from front to back, and I do feel like on the Beast X it does feel a little bit more flat. But coming over to the rear, the Beast X does have this flatter profile and it does taper off from the top mids down to the sides a bit less aggressively. But the biggest noticeable difference between these two is you do have a much higher and that much more aggressive hump over here on the Razer Viper V3 Pro, where the WLmouse Beast X just feels much more flat in the hands. All right, and sorry to be killing you guys with so many shape comparisons here, but I've been getting a lot of requests. Let's do the Maya. This will be the last one we do here. Coming over on the bottom, the Maya just all around, it does feel like a smaller version of a mouse compared to the Razer Viper V3 Pro. It does have a bit of flatter sides, so the curves are just a little bit more aggressive there on the Razer Viper V3 Pro. But the one thing that's interesting about the curve profile on the top of these is you can see the way that they curve down the sides. They don't look really that far apart from one another, but all around the V3 Pro is a larger style of the Maya for sure. And though they're not exactly the same, I do feel like this hump is a bit more aggressive, where on the Maya, even though it is smaller, this hump is kind of smoother and less aggressive, where you kind of get a little bit more height and a pointer feeling back here towards the rear area right before it drops down to the rear of the mouse. Alright guys, so that about wraps things up on the Razer Viper V3 Pro. I must say that I am very impressed with this mouse. Razer kind of threw us a little bit for a loop last year with the release of the Razer Viper Mini Signature Edition and even the release of the Cobra, but I must say that I am really enjoying this mouse. Honestly, I'm enjoying it way more than I thought I was going to. Just the feeling of it, the coating, the way that this thing was engineered, the build design of it, everything feels great. Yeah, I would like to switch the skates on it, and I would prefer if I could put mechanical switches in here, but I must say that all around, even though this is coming in right around that 55 gram range, the fact that this is a little bit of a bigger mouse and the balance on it's done so well, the performance on this is great. On this black copy, I absolutely love this coating. It feels just very grippy and god tier in my opinion. So I'm definitely going to say that this is absolutely one of my favorite mice out there. I get asked all the time, if I were to go into a big box store like a Walmart or Best Buy, what mouse would I pick up? Without a question, this is going to be my first choice. And as a matter of fact, I'm even going to go as far as saying that I do feel like, for myself personally, that this Razer Viper V3 Pro is going to be the new golden standard for a gaming mouse, especially when it comes to all these higher top tier brands. I really do feel like this is so impressive. It really blows the Logitech G Pro Superlight 2 out of the water. I really wish that mouse was more innovative like this one is. And I must say that these mice are getting so good that it really is making my job as being a mouse reviewer really hard, because it's really becoming difficult to really say any bad things about any of these mice. So clearly my final verdict on the Razer Viper V3 Pro is I absolutely love this thing. I would like to see a mini version of it in the future, but even if that doesn't come out, I am really satisfied with the overall shape, size, and the feeling and performance of this. Alright guys, if you have any questions or feel like I left anything out, please let me know down in the comments below. Aside from that, if you've enjoyed watching this video and are interested in seeing more videos like this in the future, please drop this video a like and subscribe to my channel. And thank you guys so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next one.